The snow is piled up and most of the settlers huddle around their fires. The lucky few have houses built to shield them from the elements. A similar scene can be found all across the young colony of Massachusetts. Of the 1,000 settlers who originally arrived in summer of 1630, 200 were dead by December. As his people freeze, starve, and die, the governor is pondering a decision. They can remain where they are and continue the struggle, or they can relocate to a place across the river in the hopes that conditions would be better there. He decided to take a chance, and the settlers relocated across the river and began constructing a new town. This town, which would become the beating heart of this new colony, was named Boston. But Boston was never meant to be the colony's capital, and if things had played out slightly differently, perhaps we could have had the Charlestown Celtics, the Cambridge Tea Party, or even the Salem Red Sox. Join us today as we learn about the founding of Boston and the Massachusetts colony as a whole. Massachusetts as we know it today began in the year 1630 when Governor John Winthrop led a fleet of 11 ships and about 1,000 people into New England in the name of the Massachusetts Bay Company. However, this fleet was not the first to enter Massachusetts. Before him, several small settlements were already littered about the area, most notably Plymouth and Salem. Plymouth was not yet part of Massachusetts while Salem was. John Endicott was sent to prepare the area for a larger colony. This colony finally arrived in the summer of 1630. The 11 ships that came with Winthrop did not all arrive at once or go to the same place. Winthrop himself landed in Salem where he found Endicott's settlers in a sorry state. Of the 400 colonists who had followed Endicott to Massachusetts, 80 had died and the rest were ill and starving. By some mistake, a ship filled with food and provisions that was meant to be sent to the colony was never shipped. This starvation was paired with a harsh winter in which most of the settlers did not have houses to shield them from the elements. Sicknesses ravaged their weakened immune systems and spread like wildfire across the colony, a common story in colonial America. This ominous sign did not discourage Winthrop and his new settlers, and they began to build upon what Endicott had prepared. When Endicott had arrived in Salem a year before, he sent a small group of men to begin a settlement on the Charles River. This settlement came to be known as Charlestown. After stopping at Salem, Winthrop brought his men there, seeing that the Charles River was the area best suited for a capital. This is because the Charles River extended deep inland and flowed out into Boston Bay, a natural harbor where ships could bring goods and people to the colony and from which the colony could sell its goods to the outside world. Most of the colony's trade would flow through this area. Many towns would be built along it. Therefore, it made sense to place its capital settlement at the mouth of this river, where it meets the harbor, especially in an age where long-distance travel was easiest over the water. Once he arrived in Charlestown, Winthrop began searching the area for the ideal location to settle. After some searching, they decided that modern-day Cambridge was the best location and began making preparations to relocate. The colony's cannons and supplies were shipped to Charlestown, from which they were supposed to be sent to Cambridge. This relocation would never occur. Just like Endicott's men before them, these new settlers were struck by fevers and scurvy they had contracted on the journey over. Ships at this time were breeding grounds for illness, especially when packed with people and livestock. These conditions made it a poor time to leave behind their settlement and have a large relocation to Cambridge. Winthrop and his advisors decided that the best course of action was to split up. While he remained in Charlestown with some of the settlers, the rest split off into groups and began building towns. By December, 200 of them were dead, and many left the colony and returned home. In Charlestown, conditions were no better. Winthrop and his advisors once again debated relocating. This time, however, Cambridge was not the candidate. Nearby, in the middle of the harbor, was the Shawmut Peninsula. All that prevented it from being an island was a thin strip of land which connected it to the mainland. Its position right at the mouth of the Charles River was perfect, and with it being surrounded by water, it was very easy to defend from outside attacks. Winthrop decided that it would be easier to survive the winter at the peninsula than at Charlestown, so he decided to relocate there with all the settlers that were with him. When they arrived, they began to build what is now the city of Boston. It's important to remember that this relocation was not meant to be permanent. They were simply staying in Boston for the winter, but once conditions had improved and they were not in imminent risk of death, Winthrop, along with his assistants and deputy governor, intended on moving to Cambridge. As the winter passed, the settlement at Boston began to develop and the people formed a community. A church was built and ministers were ordained. Many of the settlers made themselves comfortable in Boston and built houses, setting down roots in the area. At a meeting in December 1630, Governor Winthrop, the deputy governor, and the assistants agreed that they would build their own houses in Cambridge in the spring, and would likewise relocate there. When the spring came around, he began doing just that. However, before Winthrop's house in Cambridge was finished, the people of Boston pleaded that he stay. To the anger of his deputy governor, who had also begun building a house at Cambridge, Winthrop decided to stay with the people of Boston, as did the assistants, and from that point, Boston remained the capital of Massachusetts. The town soon became the heart of Massachusetts, and grew to become its largest town. By 1700, it was the largest city in all of the colonies, and would continue to rival New York and Philadelphia for the next century. The butterfly effect is the theory that small choices can lead to massive outcomes when given enough time. These choices are made often throughout history, often with little thought put into them. Their importance only becomes clear when we look back and see what they led to. If at any point in this story a different choice had been made, perhaps if Winthrop decided to remain in Charlestown, or travel to Cambridge during the winter as he had planned, or followed the agreement that he and his assistants had made in December, then American history could have been altered in ways we might not even truly understand. Boston was the birthplace of the American Revolution. The Boston Massacre shocked the 13 colonies. The Boston Tea Party and Britain's response to it was the spark that finally began the Revolution. Many of the Founding Fathers called the city home, and it was not a coincidence that the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first of the Revolution, were in Massachusetts. Assuming the war still happened, there's a chance it would have played out very differently had Cambridge been the capital of Massachusetts, or anywhere else for that matter. All of this because a century and a half before, Winthrop and his men needed somewhere better to survive the winter. It makes one wonder just how much of history is decided as if it were by the flip of a coin.